I never thought of myself as a soft touch. A retired machinist with a careful ledger and a coffee can full of receipts. I measured twice and cut once, in life as in the shop. But when my son Andrew moved back home after his startup failed, something in me shifted. Andrew was my boy, and Amanda, his quick-smiling fiancée with big plans, seemed like a bright future waiting to happen. "Just until we get on our feet," Andrew said. I paid their first month's rent, then the second, then the utilities, the car insurance that came out of nowhere, and the emergency dental work that couldn't wait. I counted it at first. Then, like rain, it just kept falling. For 3 years, I carried them. Every transfer, every loan that became a gift, I recorded in my ledger with the same precision I'd once used to craft metal parts that wouldn't fail. I ignored the small humiliations, the way Andrew's eyes slid away when I asked about the job hunt, how Amanda left her dishes in the sink after dinners I paid for, the casual "we'll Venmo you" that never materialized. I told myself it was fine. My late wife would have wanted me to help. That thought softened me every time. On a mild Thursday in May, I called to ask a simple question. "So, when's the big day?" I pictured myself in my navy suit. A small luncheon afterward, perhaps a toast I'd draft and redraft on graph paper until it was perfect. Amanda answered brightly, "Oh, we got married yesterday." She laughed at my silence. "We only had special people. Super intimate." The word landed like a dropped wrench. Special people. I nodded into the phone like no one could see me. "Well," I said carefully. "Congratulations." I hung up and sat still, the house around me suddenly cavernous. On the table, my ledger lay open. Last month's rent, this month's insurance, groceries, a set of bar stools Amanda couldn't live without. I ran my finger down the column of numbers that had grown to $41,700 and felt the room tilt. That night, I didn't sleep. I checked their social media and saw what super intimate meant. Amanda's parents beaming in professional photos, her sister holding champagne flutes, Andrew's college roommates forming an archway with their arms, all the special people who weren't me. The pink tie I'd bought for the occasion hung in my closet, price tag still attached. The toast I'd begun drafting sat in my desk drawer, full of fatherly pride no one would ever hear. A week later, Andrew called about rent. They were short again. Amanda had onboarding at a new gig any day now. I listened until he ran out of words. "Son," I said, "I only help special people." There was a pause, then noise, protests, confusion, accusations of pettiness. I kept my voice level. "No more transfers. I'm changing the locks. If you need to come by, you call first." The escalation surprised me only in its speed. 2 days later, Andrew and Amanda arrived with a family lawyer in a too-tight suit. They spread a folder of papers across my coffee table as if they owned it. "It's a standard power of attorney, Mr. Williams," the lawyer said, "just to make sure your bills get paid properly. Very common at your age." I picked up the folder, felt the weight of it, and stood. I walked to the kitchen trash can, opened the lid, and dropped the folder in. I met the lawyer's eyes. "This is a house for special people," I said. "You 3 can leave." The silence after I asked them to leave was brief. Andrew's face flushed red, a color I remembered from his childhood tantrums. "Dad, you're being ridiculous," he sputtered. "We're trying to help you." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Williams, perhaps you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "My door is that way." They left, but not before Amanda shot me a look of such naked calculation that something in me chilled. They weren't just disappointed. They were planning. I wasted no time. The next morning, I drove to my bank, where I'd been a customer for 37 years. Marion, the branch manager, recognized me immediately. "Good morning, Samuel. How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel all automatic transfers to my son's accounts," I said, sliding my ledger across her desk. "And I'd like to freeze the secondary card on my credit account." Marion glanced at the ledger, then at me. I could see the questions in her eyes, but all she said was, "Of course, we can take care of that, right now." An hour later, I left with new passwords, new PINs, and security questions Andrew couldn't possibly guess. The weight of the ledger in my hands felt different somehow, less like a record of love and more like evidence. My next stop was the hardware store. Bill Carpenter had owned it since we were both young men with full heads of hair and dreams of building things that would last. "Sammy, what can I get you today?" "Need to change my locks," I said. "All of them. And I'm thinking about cameras." Bill's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "I've got just the thing. These new smart doorbells, they record everything. My daughter put one in last year after some packages went missing." I left with new deadbolts, a video doorbell system, and window sensors that would alert my phone if anything was disturbed. Measure twice, cut once. That had been my motto in the machine shop, and it would serve me well now. By evening, my house was fortified. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the empty chair where my wife Margaret had once sat with her morning coffee, watching cardinals at the feeder. She'd been gone 7 years, but in moments like this, I could almost hear her voice. "Samuel," she would have said, "you've always been too generous. There's kindness, and then there's being taken advantage of." Margaret had been my moral compass, my true north. In losing her, I'd lost my way, trying to fill the emptiness with Andrew's needs and Amanda's endless wants. But Margaret wouldn't have wanted this for me. This slow erosion of dignity, this ledger full of one-way transactions. The next day, I made an appointment with an attorney. My neighbor, Mr. O'Neill, had recommended Ms. Priya Patel when his brother-in-law needed help with elder law issues. Her office was modest, but immaculate, with degrees on the wall and a calm efficiency that reminded me of the best machinists I'd known, people who understood that precision matters. "Mr. Williams," she said, gesturing to a chair, "tell me what brings you here today." I opened my ledger and told her everything. The years of support, the secret wedding, the lawyer with the power of attorney papers. As I spoke, Ms. Patel took notes in precise, tight handwriting. When I finished, she nodded once. "Here's what we need to do. First, document everything. Every request for money. Every visit. Every call. Keep your receipts and bank statements organized. Second, we'll draft a formal no trespass warning. Third, we'll establish a clear paper trail showing your competence and autonomy. You think they'll try something else?" People who've grown accustomed to financial support can react unpredictably when that support ends. She looked me directly in the eyes. "Mr. Williams, this isn't just about money. This is about your freedom to make your own decisions." On the drive home, I thought about what freedom had cost me so far, $41,700 and counting. But the real price had been my self-respect. Slowly paid out in installments of silence and acquiescence, I was done paying. That evening, as I checked my new security cameras, I saw a car slow down in front of my house. Andrew's car. It circled the block twice before driving away. I wasn't surprised when my phone rang 20 minutes later. "Dad," Andrew said, his voice conciliatory, "we need to talk." Amanda and I have been thinking, and we found someone who can help us all sort this out." "Who might that be?" I asked, though I already knew. "A family mediator. A lawyer, actually. He specializes in these situations. We'd like to bring him by tomorrow around noon." I thought of Ms. Patel's warning, of my new locks, of the line I'd drawn in my ledger. "Son," I said carefully, "I'll be home at noon. But you should know. I have my own attorney now." There was a pause. Then a forced laugh. That's not necessary, Dad. This is family business." "Family doesn't turn fathers into ATMs," I said, and hung up. At precisely noon the next day, my doorbell camera alerted me to visitors. Through my phone screen, I watched Andrew, Amanda, and a man in a charcoal suit with a leather portfolio huddle on my front porch. I took my time answering, straightening my collar in the hallway mirror, a habit from when Margaret was alive. "Look presentable when company comes," she'd say. This wasn't company, though. This was an invasion. I opened the door just enough to see them clearly. "Dad," Andrew said with a rehearsed smile. "This is Mr. Donovan. He's here to help us sort things out." Mr. Donovan extended his hand. "Mr. Williams, a pleasure. May we come in?" I stepped back, allowing them into the living room where, for 3 years, I'd listened to their promises and excuses. They settled on the couch while Mr. Donovan chose the armchair closest to me, opening his portfolio on the coffee table my father had built. "Mr. Williams, your son and daughter-in-law are concerned about you living alone, managing complex finances at your age," he began. "A power of attorney is simply a precautionary measure. It ensures bills are paid correctly, investments are properly managed." "I don't have investments," I said. Mr. Donovan smiled. "Precisely why planning matters. This grants Andrew limited authority to make financial decisions on your behalf, should you become unable." He slid a document folder across the table. "It's quite standard for someone in your position." I picked up the folder, feeling its weight. Inside was a sheaf of papers dense with legal language. Words like incapacity and authority jumped out at me. I flipped through several pages while they waited, expectant. "My position," I repeated. "And what position is that, exactly?" "A vulnerable senior living alone," Amanda interjected, her voice honey-sweet. "We're worried about you, Samuel." I looked at my son, searching for the boy I'd taught to measure twice and cut once. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "This isn't about worry," I said. "This is about money." "Dad, that's not fair," Andrew started, but I held up my hand. "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" I stood, the folder still in my hand, and walked to my kitchen trash can. I lifted the lid and dropped the entire folder inside. There's nothing fair about being treated like a checkbook with a pulse. Mr. Donovan's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Mr. Williams, I strongly advise against—" "This is a house for special people," I said, echoing Amanda's words. "And right now, none of you qualify." "You're being ridiculous," Andrew hissed, standing up. "We're trying to protect you." "From what? From spending my own money? From living my own life?" I moved toward the door. "I've retained counsel, Ms. Priya Patel. Any further communications should go through her." Amanda's face hardened. "So you can afford an attorney, but not help your own son?" "I can afford my priorities," I said, opening the door. "And I've issued a no trespass warning. Mr. O'Neill across the street is a witness." Sure enough, Mr. O'Neill was watering his hydrangeas, watching our exchange with undisguised interest. He waved cheerfully. They left, Mr. Donovan muttering about regrettable decisions and further options, I locked the door behind them, my hands steady despite the trembling inside my chest. It started that evening, the barrage of messages. Calls I didn't answer. Texts that began with concern, "We're worried about your judgment," and escalated to thinly veiled threats. After everything we've invested in that house. They claimed partial ownership based on a weekend Andrew had spent painting the guest room 3 years ago. They demanded compensation for furniture they'd gifted me. I documented each message as Ms. Patel had advised, copying them to a separate file, tracking timestamps. The pattern was clear. Love had been transactional for them all along. I had just failed to read the fine print. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with an alert from my backdoor camera. The timestamp read 11:37 p.m. The figure on my screen, testing the handle of my kitchen door, wore a hoodie pulled low, but I recognized Andrew's walk, the same slight hitch in his gait he'd had since a skateboarding accident at 15. I watched him rattle the door for nearly a minute before giving up. Then I called Ms. Patel. "Ms. Patel? Samuel Williams. I'm sorry to call so late." I watched the recording replay, Andrew's familiar silhouette disappearing into the darkness of my backyard. "My son just tried to enter my house through the back door. It's all on camera. Are you safe?" Her voice was clear, focused. "Yes. The door was locked. He's gone now. Save that footage. I'll request a formal restraining order in the morning." She paused. "Mr. Williams, this escalation suggests they're growing desperate. Be prepared for them to try other avenues." After we hung up, I sat in my darkened kitchen, watching the shadows of tree branches move across my walls. This room had once been filled with Sunday dinners and birthday celebrations. Now it was a fortress I was defending against my own blood. I thought about calling Andrew, demanding an explanation. But what explanation could there be for testing a locked door close to midnight? The answer was as clear as my security footage. They wanted something in this house, perhaps financial documents, perhaps my checkbook, perhaps evidence they could use to build a case against me. The next morning, I reviewed all the camera footage from overnight. After the back door attempt, Andrew had returned to the front of the house, speaking in low tones with someone in a car parked at the curb, likely Amanda. The camera didn't capture their words, but their gestures were animated, angry. I forwarded everything to Ms. Patel, then checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Andrew, 2 from Amanda, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemails, just digital footprints of persistence. Mr. O'Neill waved me over when I went to collect my mail. His weathered face was creased with concern. "Had some visitors last night, didn't you?" he asked, leaning on his fence. "Saw the car circling. Kept my porch light on just in case." "I appreciate that, Jim." He nodded toward my house. "Those cameras were a good idea. My Elaine and we've been watching out for you. That boy of yours—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Doesn't seem right, what they're doing." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." I spent that day gathering documents, bank statements, transfer records, text messages requesting money, and organizing them chronologically in a binder. If they wanted a fight, I'd be armed with facts. Ms. Patel had warned me. Paper can be a weapon, used for attack or defense. I intended to be well defended. That night, as I double-checked my locks before bed, my phone lit up with a text from Andrew. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We're worried about your mental state. If you don't cooperate, we may have to involve social services for your own protection." I stared at those words, "your own protection," and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. They were shifting tactics. If they couldn't get to my finances directly, they would try to have someone else do it for them. I forwarded the message to Ms. Patel with a simple note: escalation as predicted. Her response was equally brief: documented. Be prepared for visitors. Answer the door, be courteous, but say nothing without me present. As I set my phone down, I wondered what visitors meant. I didn't have to wonder long. The next morning at precisely 9:30 a.m., my doorbell camera showed two people in business casual attire standing on my porch. The woman held a clipboard. The man wore a government ID badge, a wellness check, right on schedule. I smoothed my shirt and opened the door with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Mr. Samuel Williams?" The woman consulted her clipboard. "I'm Lisa Mercer from Adult Protective Services. This is my colleague, Dave Simmons. We've received a concern about your welfare. May we come in?" I nodded, stepping aside to let them enter. "Of course. Would either of you care for coffee? I just made a fresh pot." They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting hospitality. "Coffee would be nice," Lisa said cautiously. "Thank you." I led them to my kitchen, where morning light streamed through windows that overlooked my small vegetable garden. The normalcy of the scene, a clean kitchen, a pot of coffee, yesterday's newspaper folded neatly on the table, seemed to give them pause. "Sugar? Cream?" I asked, reaching for mugs. "Black for me," Dave said. Lisa nodded in agreement. "Mr. Williams," she began as I set the steaming mugs before them, "we've received reports expressing concern about your memory and decision-making. Are you having trouble remembering things? Managing your medications or bills?" I took a sip of my coffee, considering my words carefully. "I'm managing quite well. Thank you. If you don't mind waiting for my attorney, I'd be happy to address any specific concerns." Again, that exchange of glances. "Your attorney?" Dave asked. "Ms. Priya Patel. I can call her now if you'd like." "That's unusual, but certainly you're right," Lisa said, her professional demeanor slipping just slightly to reveal surprise. I called Ms. Patel on speakerphone, explaining the situation. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said without hesitation. "Please don't answer any questions until I arrive." We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Dave examined the woodwork of my cabinets with exaggerated interest, while Lisa made notes on her clipboard. I refilled their coffee cups and offered store-bought cookies from a tin Margaret had always kept stocked. Small courtesies from a supposedly confused old man. When Ms. Patel arrived, precisely 19 minutes later, she carried a thick binder under her arm. "Lisa, Dave," she greeted them by name. "APS visits are typically confidential. May I ask who filed this report?" "I'm afraid we can't disclose that," Lisa said. Ms. Patel nodded, as if she'd expected this answer. "Then let's address the concerns directly." She opened her binder on the table. "Here are Mr. Williams's complete bank records for the past 3 years, showing a pattern of systematic withdrawals by his son and daughter-in-law, totaling over $41,000. She turned a page. "Here's a notarized letter from his primary physician, Dr. Kaplan, dated 3 days ago, confirming Mr. Williams is in excellent cognitive health. And here's an appointment confirmation for a neuropsychological evaluation with Dr. Bowethi, Deidre Moore, next Tuesday. An independent assessment Mr. Williams proactively scheduled." Lisa and Dave leaned forward, examining the documents with professional thoroughness. I watched their expressions shift from routine concern to something more complex. "Mr. Williams," Dave said, "do you feel safe in your home?" "I do now," I answered, gesturing to my security cameras. "Though I have video evidence of my son attempting to enter my house through a locked door at 11:37 p.m. 2 nights ago. Ms. Patel produced a USB drive. We've forwarded this footage to the police. We're also formalizing a no trespass order. Lisa set down her clipboard, meeting my eyes directly. Mr. Williams, I'm going to be frank. These visits usually involve finding seniors in distress, forgotten medications, unpaid bills, unsafe living conditions. What I see here is, she paused, choosing her words carefully, unusual preparedness. Preparedness isn't paranoia, I said quietly. It's dignity. She nodded, a flash of something like respect crossing her face. As they prepared to leave, she lingered by the door while Dave walked ahead to their car. I'm sorry this is happening to you, she said, her voice low. We see cases like this more often than you'd think. Not everyone has your foresight. After they left, Ms. Patel and I sat at my kitchen table, reviewing next steps. That went as well as could be expected, she said. But it's only the beginning. They're establishing a record, trying to build a case. For what? I asked. Potentially, guardianship. She closed her binder with a decisive snap. It's an extreme measure, but given their attempts so far, I wouldn't rule it out. Her words hung in the air between us, a possibility too grave to fully absorb, but I didn't have long to contemplate it. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside, legal papers bearing the county court seal. A petition for guardianship over me and my estate. They were no longer just asking for access to my accounts. They wanted control of my entire life. The guardianship petition sprawled across my dining room table like an invasion. 23 pages of legal language that, stripped of its formality, said one thing. Samuel Williams is no longer competent to manage his own affairs. I read it slowly, methodically, as I would technical drawings in my machinist days. The allegations formed a careful architecture of doubt. Increasing memory lapses, noted by Andrew and Amanda. Confusion about medications, documented by a local pharmacist named Green. Erratic financial decisions, evidenced by cash allegedly handed to strangers. 2 sworn statements were attached, both from young women I vaguely recognized as Amanda's friends from her book club. Both claimed I'd given them envelopes of cash at a holiday gathering, then seemed confused when they thanked me later. Both expressed deep concern for my well-being. My hands shook as I reached the final page. The petition requested emergency temporary guardianship pending a hearing, meaning Andrew could gain control of my accounts before I ever saw the inside of a courtroom. When Ms. Patel arrived an hour later, I'd composed myself, but only just. They're lying, I said, pointing to the pharmacist's note. I've used Henderson's pharmacy for 15 years. I know exactly what medications I take and when. Ms. Patel nodded, making notes in her precise hand. Their strategy is clear. Create enough doubt about your competence to secure temporary control. Then use that control to rewrite the narrative. They want to silence me with paperwork, I said, the realization settling cold and heavy in my stomach. Yes, she didn't soften the truth. But paperwork cuts both ways. We'll build our own paper trail. She outlined our counteroffensive. Subpoena Andrew and Amanda's bank records to document the pattern of financial dependence. Secure statements from my doctor, neighbors, and community contacts. Obtain the original records from Henderson's pharmacy, and prepare thoroughly for my neuropsychological evaluation with Dr. Moore. What about these witnesses? I asked, tapping the affidavits. We'll depose them under oath. False statements in a guardianship proceeding can be prosecuted. She looked at me carefully. Did you give them cash gifts? I thought back to the holiday dinner Andrew and Amanda had hosted, where I'd met these women briefly. Christmas cards, I said finally. I gave everyone at that dinner Christmas cards with $50 gift certificates to that bookstore Amanda likes. I have the receipt in my tax folder. Ms. Patel smiled for the first time that day. Perfect. Documented gifts that match your ledger, not confused cash handouts. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet house, listening to the clock tick. The petition had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. I'd spent my life building things, fixing things, measuring and cutting with precision. Now, I was being dismantled by my own son, piece by piece, with lies dressed as concern. That night, I dreamed of drowning in paper, white sheets rising around me like floodwater, covering my mouth, my eyes, until I couldn't breathe or see. I woke gasping at 3 a.m., fumbling for the bedside light. "Pull yourself together, Sam," I muttered to the empty room. Margaret would have said the same. She never tolerated self-pity, not even when the cancer came for her. The next morning, I drove to the community center where I'd played chess every Thursday for the past 5 years. Frank Delgado, my regular opponent, looked up from setting the board. "You're early, Sam," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Everything all right?" I hadn't planned to tell anyone about the guardianship petition, but Frank had been a high school principal for 30 years. He knew something about human nature. "My son is trying to have me declared incompetent," I said, the words strange in my mouth, "to get control of my money." Frank's hands stilled on the chess pieces. "That's a serious move. What's your counter?" As we played, I explained the situation. Frank listened without interruption, then said, "You know I'll testify if needed. So will half the chess club. You've been beating us soundly for years. No signs of confusion there." His simple offer of support steadied me. By the time Ms. Patel called that afternoon, I was ready for her news. "I've accessed the pharmacy records," she said. "The note they're citing isn't a formal assessment. It's a comment added to your file after your son spoke with Mr. Green. He apparently expressed concern about your medication management and asked the pharmacist to keep an eye out. Mr. Green made a notation but performed no evaluation." "Andrew manipulated him," I said, pieces falling into place. "It appears so. I've left a message for Mr. Green requesting a meeting. If he confirms he was pressured or misled." She didn't need to finish. We had our first crack in their case. Mr. Green from Henderson's Pharmacy was younger than I expected, early 40s, with prematurely gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked uncomfortable sitting across from Ms. Patel and me in her office, his white coat replaced by a button-down shirt for the meeting. "I want to be clear," he began, adjusting his glasses nervously. "I never conducted any cognitive assessment of Mr. Williams. I'm not qualified to do that." "Then please explain this note in his file." Ms. Patel slid a copy across the table. Mr. Green grimaced. "Andrew came in about 2 months ago, very concerned about his father's medication management. He said you were forgetting doses, possibly doubling up. He asked if I could note any irregularities." "And did you observe any?" Ms. Patel asked. "None whatsoever. Mr. Williams has been perfectly consistent. His refill schedule is exactly as prescribed." He looked at me directly. "I should have consulted you before making any notation. I apologize." "Would you be willing to provide a written clarification?" Ms. Patel asked. He nodded quickly. "Absolutely. I've already drafted something." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I want no part in misrepresenting a customer's competence." The clarification was detailed and unambiguous. No observed medication management issues, no professional opinion rendered regarding cognitive function, and an explicit statement that the original note had been made at Andrew's request without my knowledge or consent. "This changes the landscape," Ms. Patel said after Mr. Green left. "But we're just getting started." 2 days later, I sat across from Dr. Deidre Moore, a neuropsychologist with 30 years' experience. For 4 hours, she tested my memory, reasoning, judgment, and executive function through a battery of assessments, remembering word lists, solving puzzles, identifying patterns, answering questions about practical scenarios. "You're doing fine, Mr. Efoy Williams," she said, when I apologized for taking too long on a particularly challenging sequence task. "Take your time." When we finished, she reviewed her notes thoughtfully. "I'll need a few days to compile my full report, but I can tell you now, I see no evidence of cognitive impairment. Your performance is consistent with someone of your age and education level, and in some areas, notably above average." Relief washed over me. I hadn't realized how deeply Andrew's allegations had wormed into my confidence until that moment. On Thursday evening, I attended my garden club meeting as I had every month for the past decade. 8 of us gathered in Elaine Mercer's sunroom, surrounded by her prized orchids. I'd planned to maintain my usual quiet presence, but when Louise asked about my unusual silence, the whole story spilled out. "Those ungrateful children," Elaine fumed, "after everything you've done for them." Howard, our club president, cleared his throat. "Samuel keeps our meeting minutes, has for years. Names every plant by its Latin classification without notes. Never misses a detail." One by one, they offered support, statements they would sign, testimony they would give if needed. Even Timothy, who rarely spoke at meetings, described how I'd explained complex soil chemistry to newer members, recalling specific pH values and mineral compositions without reference. The following day, Mr. O'Neill invited me for coffee on his porch. "I've compiled all the security footage," he said, passing me a USB drive. "Time-stamped, organized by date. Shows a pattern. They circle the house, test doors, take photos through windows." He'd also documented Andrew and Amanda returning the night after the power of attorney attempt, this time with someone who appeared to be taking measurements of the property. "Looked like a real estate appraiser to me," Mr. O'Neill said, though they didn't bring him to the front door. I added his evidence to the growing arsenal. By the time Dr. Moore's report arrived, 12 pages of technical assessment concluding with, "Mr. Williams demonstrates intact executive function, memory, and judgment. No evidence supports limiting his autonomy." I felt the tide turning. Ms. Patel called a preparation session a week before the hearing. "Court is theater," she explained as we sat in her office. "The judge will be looking not just at our evidence, but at you, how you present yourself, how you respond to questions." "What should I do?" I asked. "Answer what's asked, nothing more. Breathe. Maintain eye contact. Remember that you're not on trial. They're the ones making extraordinary claims." She tapped my file. "Let the evidence speak. We have facts. They have innuendo. And if they ask about the wedding?" The question that had started everything. A small smile crossed her face. "If it comes up, answer truthfully. They only invited special people." Those 4 words tell the whole story. As I drove home, I rehearsed potential questions in my head, practiced keeping my voice steady when discussing Andrew's betrayal. The court date loomed just 7 days away. In my rearview mirror, the sunset painted the sky in fierce oranges and reds, colors of warning, but also of a day ending, making way for something new. The county courthouse stood solid and imposing, its limestone facade weathered by decades of rain and judgment. I had passed it countless times over the years, but never entered until that Wednesday morning in June, dressed in my best suit, the same one I'd planned to wear to Andrew's wedding. Ms. Patel met me on the steps, crisp in a navy pantsuit, carrying a leather briefcase that matched her no-nonsense demeanor. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." Inside, courtroom 4 was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches worn smooth by thousands before me, who had come seeking justice or mercy. Andrew and Amanda sat at the left table with their attorney, Mr. Donovan from the living room ambush, now in a better-fitting suit. Andrew's leg bounced nervously beneath the table. Amanda sat perfectly still, her face composed in an expression of concerned daughterly love that might have convinced me once. Not anymore. The bailiff called for all to rise as Judge Eleanor Ramirez entered, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She reviewed the file before her, then peered over those glasses at all parties. "This court understands the seriousness of guardianship proceedings," she began. "We will hear evidence from both sides. Mr. Donovan, as the petitioner, you may begin." Donovan approached the bench with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of concern for an elderly parent showing signs of cognitive decline and financial vulnerability." He outlined their narrative, my supposed confusion, the cash gifts I couldn't recall, my sudden irrational behavior in cutting off Andrew and Amanda, and the concerning note from my pharmacy. As promised, Ms. Patel took careful notes, but didn't interrupt. When Donovan called Andrew to testify, she squeezed my arm briefly, a reminder to stay calm. Andrew painted a picture of a loving son worried about his father's deterioration. He described finding unpaid bills, a fabrication, noticing my confusion about dates and appointments, another lie, and his heartbreak at watching my decline. "And would you say your relationship with your father was close before these issues began?" Donovan asked. "Very close," Andrew answered, his voice catching theatrically. "We've always been there for each other." When Ms. Patel rose for cross-examination, her approach was methodical, almost gentle. "Andrew, you testified that you've always been there for your father. Could you estimate how much financial support he's provided to you and your wife in the past 3 years?" Andrew shifted. "I don't keep track of that." "Fortunately, your father does." Ms. Patel presented bank records showing transfers totaling $41,700. "Would you say this pattern of support, your father to you, not you to him, has been the foundation of your relationship?" "That's not fair," Andrew protested. "It was temporary help." "For 3 years," she noted. "Now, let's discuss the wedding. When did you and Amanda get married?" Andrew's eyes darted to Amanda. "May 12th of this year." "And was your father invited?" A pause. "We had a very small ceremony." "Did you invite him?" Ms. Patel pressed. "We only invited special people," Andrew said, the phrase slipping out before he could catch himself. A murmur went through the courtroom. Several jurors exchanged glances. Ms. Patel let the words hang in the air. "No further questions?" Amanda's testimony followed the same script. Loving concern, sudden changes in my behavior, fears for my welfare. When pressed about why they brought a lawyer to my home for a power of attorney before any formal assessment of my competence, she said, "We were trying to streamline responsibilities." "Streamline access," Ms. Patel corrected, "to his accounts." The morning continued with their witnesses, the 2 young women who claimed I'd given them inexplicable cash. Under oath and faced with my Christmas card receipts matching the exact amounts they'd received, both admitted they were wedding gifts, not random handouts from a confused old man. After lunch recess, Mr. Green took the stand. He read his clarification into the record, his voice steady as he explained how Andrew had pressured him for a note about non-existent medication issues. When he finished, Judge Ramirez removed her glasses and studied Andrew with a long evaluative look. Our case began with Dr. Moore, who explained her assessment in clear, authoritative terms. Mr. Williams scored within normal to above-average ranges on all cognitive measures, she testified. His executive function, memory, and judgment are intact. There is no medical or psychological basis for limiting his autonomy. Ms. Patel then called Mr. O'Neill, who described the late-night attempts to enter my home and presented his meticulously organized security footage. 3 members of my garden club testified to my consistent participation, detailed memory, and ongoing contributions as club secretary. I was the final witness. As Ms. Patel had coached, I answered each question directly, maintained eye contact with the judge, and kept my voice steady even when describing the wedding revelation or the living room confrontation. During cross-examination, Mr. Donovan tried to provoke an emotional reaction. "Isn't it true, Mr. Williams, that you're punishing your son for a perceived slight about his wedding?" I considered his question, then answered, "I'm protecting myself from people who excluded me from their lives until they needed money, then tried to take control of mine, when I said no." In her closing argument, Ms. Patel was direct. "Your Honor, guardianship is an extraordinary remedy for extraordinary circumstances that do not exist here. What does exist is a pattern of financial dependency followed by manipulation when that dependency was threatened." She held up my ledger. "This is not the record of a confused man. This is the documentation of systematic exploitation that Mr. Williams had the clarity to recognize and the courage to end." Judge Ramirez thanked both parties and announced she would review all evidence before ruling the following morning. As we left the courtroom, Andrew tried to approach me, but Ms. Patel steered me toward the exit. "One more day," she said quietly. "The truth is on our side." That night, I sat on my back porch watching fireflies rise from the grass. The testimony had been exhausting, but also strangely freeing. For the first time, the story had been told in full. Not in whispers or implications, but in documented fact. Under oath and on the record. Whatever tomorrow brought, that truth would remain. The courthouse seemed different the next morning, less imposing, more like any other building of brick and stone. Perhaps facing your fears diminishes them. I arrived early, sitting alone on a bench in the hallway, watching people hurry past with their own worries, their own battles. Ms. Patel arrived precisely 10 minutes before our scheduled time, her briefcase in hand, her expression cautiously optimistic. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Ready," I said, and meant it. Inside courtroom 4, Andrew and Amanda already sat at their table. Amanda's posture was rigid, her fingers drumming silently on the table's edge. Andrew stared straight ahead, not turning when I entered. Mr. Donovan leaned toward them, whispering something that made Amanda shake her head sharply. Judge Ramirez entered promptly at 9 o'clock, her black robe sweeping behind her as she took her place at the bench. She arranged papers before her, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed the room. "I have reviewed all testimony and evidence in this matter thoroughly," she began. "Guardianship is an extraordinary remedy intended to protect vulnerable individuals who cannot protect themselves. It requires clear and convincing evidence of incapacity and a pattern of risk that does not exist here." She looked directly at Andrew and Amanda. "What does exist is a pattern of financial dependency and manipulation. The petitioners have failed to establish any cognitive deficiency or decision-making impairment in Mr. Williams. To the contrary, the evidence shows a man of sound mind taking reasonable steps to protect his assets and autonomy when faced with concerning behavior from the very parties seeking control. She closed the file decisively. Petition denied. The words fell like a judge's gavel, final and irrevocable. Something tight in my chest loosened for the first time in weeks. I exhaled slowly, feeling lightheaded with relief. Ms. Patel squeezed my arm. "Congratulations," she whispered. Across the aisle, Amanda's face flushed crimson. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse with jerky movements. Andrew remained seated, his expression a mixture of shock and something else, perhaps the first glimmerings of shame. As we left the courtroom, he approached, stopping a few feet away. "Dad," he began, his voice uncertain. "Not here," I said quietly. "Not now." "This isn't over," Amanda hissed, standing behind him. "You can't just cut us out of your life." "Actually," Ms. Patel interjected, "that's precisely what the court has affirmed his right to do." Outside, the June sun was bright and warm. I shook Ms. Patel's hand, thanking her for everything. "What happens now?" I asked. "You'll live your life," she said simply, "on your terms." That afternoon, I called a realtor, Janet Kim, whose signs I'd seen around town. The house that had felt cavernous since the wedding revelation could be sold. I was ready for something new, something untainted by memories of betrayal. "I'd like something smaller," I told her. "Maybe near the river." That evening, I researched elder abuse prevention organizations and made my first donation, $500 to a nonprofit called Silver Shield that offered legal aid to seniors facing exploitation. Their website mentioned volunteer speakers who shared their experiences. I bookmarked the page, thinking, that could be me. As I closed my laptop, my eye caught the ledger on my desk, the record of all I'd given and all that had been taken. I opened to a fresh page and wrote a single line. Measure twice, cut once, and keep your receipts. Then I closed it. The past was documented. The future was mine to write. The next morning, Janet called with news of a riverside apartment available for viewing. 1 bedroom, a small balcony, walking distance to shops and the chess club. "It gets beautiful morning light," she said. "Peaceful. Private." "I'll see it today," I told her. Already picturing myself there, free from the shadows of a house too full of ghosts. 3 months after the courtroom victory, I sat on my riverside balcony, watching the sun rise over water that flowed endlessly, unstoppable. My small apartment had become a sanctuary, bright, orderly, and entirely my own. The morning ritual remained constant. Coffee in a blue ceramic mug, a housewarming gift from Mr. O'Neill, the newspaper spread before me, and the quiet company of my thoughts. The tomato plants I'd started on the balcony were thriving, their fruits beginning to blush red. I'd always been good with my hands, patient with growth. Now I applied that patience to myself. My new ledger tracked different numbers, $75 for a weekend woodworking class where I was learning to craft small boats in bottles, $320 for plane tickets to Chicago to visit my sister Diana, $150 for a set of fine chisels I'd always wanted but never justified buying. The columns balanced perfectly, not because someone else's needs were being subtracted, but because I was finally adding myself to the equation. Every Thursday morning, I still played chess at the community center. Frank had introduced me to the volunteer program at Silver Shield, where twice a month I spoke to groups of seniors about financial boundaries and the subtle signs of exploitation. Measure twice, cut once, and keep your receipts, I would tell them, watching understanding dawn in their eyes. Word reached me through Janet, my realtor, that Andrew and Amanda had moved to a smaller apartment across town. The startup hadn't materialized. They were both working regular jobs now, Andrew at an insurance office, Amanda at a department store. They had downsized, sold the furniture I'd bought them, learned to live within means that were actually theirs. They hadn't called again. Perhaps someday they would, with genuine remorse rather than calculated need. I wasn't sure what I would say if they did. That uncertainty was its own kind of freedom. Sometimes, in the quiet evening hours when the river turned silver with moonlight, I would whisper the words that had changed everything. I only help special people. Then I would smile, knowing that after 72 years, I had finally put myself on that list.